Let's take a look at inheritance. I'm going to start off with a new class, file, make a new project, Java application, and let's call it test inheritance. Okay, make sure I know where it's being saved at. Um, and in this one I want to create a main class. I'm going to be using this to test my classes. So I'm going to finish that. And I could use JUnit testing, but in this case we'll go ahead and we'll use this main Java program for testing. So let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit and make sure everything's working okay. So we're off to a good start. And in here, let's go ahead and do our okay. Let's move these over just so it's a little easier to tell where it begins and ends, where the block of codes begin and end. So I have my test class here, and it's in the package test inheritance. So the package contains classes. In this case, I've only got one class in here right now. And in this case, I only have one method, and that's my main method. And this is where everything starts at. So the compiler will come here first. So let's go ahead and run this, make sure everything works okay. And it looks like everything's working. Let me close these out. Now to this package, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add some more classes. Now I could put these right here. I could put another class right here. Uh, oops. Public class, whatever. But I'm not going to do that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, so that it's a little easier to read, a little easier to find, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these their own separate classes, but I'm going to keep them in this package that I've created. So I look under here under projects, and if you don't see that right now, what you can do is, depending if you're using Eclipse or NetBeans, either way, you can reset the windows so that this will pop up again. And come over to projects, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new Java class, and I'm going to call this one, how about if I call it, let's see, person, and make sure it's in the right project and right package. Okay, so I've got that. So person it's in the same package, and the only thing it has right now is a empty class in there, nothing in it. So if I try to run this file, let me right click in here and try to run the file, I'm going to get an error message that says class test inheritance person. So this person class in the package test inheritance does not have a main method, so I can't really run this one. And you remember the test inheritance, we do have a main method, so we can run this if we wanted to. So I've got two classes in here, my test inheritance with my main method, and then a person class. Now inheritance, let's use an example which is a little different from what we've started here, but say Um, Inheritance, then, the normal way of you think of inheritance is gaining something from someone. Um, Say, for instance, your father has a garage with a set of tools, and God forbid he passes away and leaves you with all of those tools. So you inherit all of those tools. Now, the tools stay in his garage, but you have access to all of those tools. So you don't have to have any tools of your own. uh, you can just access all of your father's tools. So father would be the super class, and you would be the subclass. Um, so the subclass can inherit everything that is public uh, from the superclass. Now, superclasses are also called base classes, but I'm not going to do that. I think it's a little more confusing. So what we do is that we can have access to all of those tools in the superclass, and then and Java only allows for single inheritance, which means you can only inherit from one class. You cannot inherit from multiple classes at one time. Now, there are ways around that. And also, say for instance, you have a daughter, and your daughter can inherit everything from you. So your daughter would have access to all of the tools which you have inherited from your father. So indirectly, she has access to all of those tools that your father has. So, because she inherits from you and you inherit from him, she has access to all those. So that's what inheritance is. You have access to public methods and variables uh, directly from a class as long as they're public. They're named public. Okay, so let's go to this example right here. Now we have a person class. Let's go ahead and put a constructor in here. We always want a constructor in our classes. So shortcut, put in a constructor, and it's a constructor with no arguments. And right now it doesn't do anything. How about if we do this? We have a class variable, instance variable, which is a string. We're going to call it name, and we not only will create that variable name, but we will assign a value to it. Uh, let's start off with no, let's not do this. Let's do it in our constructor. So let's leave this here, and inside of our default constructor, where we don't pass anything, so there's no arguments in here at all. So once we call this, and we'll see about calling this, what it will do is let's initialize it here, because that's what a constructor does. Is it doesn't really construct anything, it just initializes variables normally. Okay, and let's initialize it with a name. Yeah, that's probably better. Okay, now we want to hide this string variable, so we make it private, which means that only this class called person will any of the methods have access to this variable named private. So this constructor, which really is a void method, has access to name. Okay. Now I could also say this dot name, and that's going to be the this in essence will be the same thing. This just means this class. So this person class, the variable called name, which is this right here. Okay, kind of the same thing as long as we're using it inside of this class. Okay, it just uniquely identifies it. Okay, so we've got our constructor, and tell you what, so since say someone wants direct access to the name, they want to be able to set this name, or they want to be able to pass in a name to this class and change the name, or they want to be able to see what the name is. So let's make getters and setters out of this. So again, I'm going to insert some code. You can type these directly, and I'm going to make a getter which will just return, and put a check mark on here under name, generate the, if I can click that, generate the getter, and just for the sake of organization, how about if we put this down there? Doesn't matter if it's above or below. So the getter, you see, will just return the name when you invoke this method. And this method is public, which means we have access to it from other classes, and it will return a string, and the name of the method is getName. So when we invoke this, it will return whatever our name has been set to. Well, here when we first call the constructor, we set the name, but how about if we want to set the name? So let's generate, and again I'm going to insert the code for this, and I want to set the name. Generate, and it generated a setter for me. Okay, and again let's move this down a little bit. Clean this up. So highlight all this and let's format this so it cleans it up a little bit. Okay. So now we could make, if we made this private, we wouldn't need this getter and this setter. We could just access this name directly from this class. But what we do is that we hide the implementation of our class and the data that's in our class, so that other programmers can't have direct access to this information. So we make this private, and then we allow, if we want to, access to these by either setting the name from the outside or getting the name from the outside. And depending on the variable, we may not have a getter or setter, or we may only allow them to get the name, or we may only allow them to set the name. So keeping everything private. Alright, let's go ahead and put a method in here too. So let me go to, now you notice these methods, we have these two methods plus the constructor, and we need to make sure these are inside of this class. Let me move this down here so you can see. Here's the beginning and end of our class. So we have our instance variables here, and we have our methods all inside of this person class. So let's make sure that we're still inside of the person class, and let's make a method of our choosing, which we learned how to make methods in previous exercise, the previous chapter. Let's make it public, so that anyone can have access to it. Let's return an integer, and let's call it how about if we call it add, and let's pass in an integer called x and an integer called y. Okay, so this is what our method does, and let's put our curly braces in here so know the beginning and ending of our code and where that's at. And what we're going to do is we're just going to return x plus y. So we're just going to add these two together and return an integer value. So that's the only thing in our method that's the only thing this method does. Okay, so we have, again, we've got these two classes, one which we're going to use to test this, and then we've got our person class which does a few things. So let's try this out right now. I'm going to comment this out. We don't need this. And oops. And let's go ahead and try out our person class. So let's make an object out of person. So person, and let's call it person1, and instantiate an object with the reserved word new, and let's call the constructor called person. Okay, so we've made an object out of the person class. So now that we've done that, we have access to all of those things. So how about if we go ahead and well, let's say P1, and what we're going to do, and when I do that, you notice that we not only have all those methods that are highlighted which are in our person class, but we also inherited some methods and variables from the object class. So there are automatically, we always inherit from object. Any class you create inherits from object. Okay, but the ones we're looking at right now, get name, set name, and add. Okay, those are the three we'll be looking at doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and set the name. How about if we use the set name, and let's pass in a name to it, and let's say my name. Okay, so we've set the name. Now that we've set it, what we can do is that it will return whatever name it is. So let's see what that is. System.out.println, and what we're going to do is we're going to say the name is, and I should make this font bigger, shouldn't I? And then plus and P1 and get name. Okay. And I think it wants a similar. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see how this plays out. And you see it does what we told it to do, which is it outputs my name. It outputs the name is, which is right here, and then we go ahead and go to that method called getName, and when we go to the method called getName, it returns whatever the name has been set at. And with our setter, we changed it to, we passed in my name, so that's what name is set at right now. Okay, so that seems to be working okay. We've created a class, and we see that we have access to that class. Now, inheritance is a relationship. So you know if you can inherit from a class if you can say is a. So let's make another class here. So I'm going to go back to my package, and I'm going to create a new Java class, And let's create a class called student. Now, student is a person, right? All students, hopefully, are people. So, unless a dog signed up for class, student is a person. So it meets that. And what we can do is, since it is a person, what we can do is that we can inherit uh, person and all of the methods that are in person. So the same way we inherit all the tools from our father and have access to all those, we can inherit, or the word is extends. I think inherit would have been a better choice of a reserved word for that. But it extends person. So we have access to all those, even though uh, so that's the only thing I'm going to do here. Well, let's make a constructor. So again, you can just type this, or you can insert the code there. So let's make a constructor out of here. Okay, so we've got the student class. You notice I don't have any other methods in here other than my constructor. Don't have any instance variables. Um, so anything I have will have to come from the person class. So let's go back to test inheritance now. Let's go ahead and try this out and see if this works. So let's make a new object. Let's make a student and call it S1. We're going to make a student object. So new is the keyword to make the object. Let's call the constructor. So student, and we're calling a constructor with no arguments, and that does it. So we have a student object. So now let's see what we have access to. So let's go ahead and try this. Let's do system.out.println, and what we're going to do is we're going to see if we have, remember there was a class that we called add, and I'm saying call add here. Wow, I need to change those font colors too. I bet this is hard to see. Okay, and since it's an integer, we don't need to format it. So we have student1 period, and now you see that we have access to a lot of things here. We still have access to a lot of different methods. Anything with the paren there, that's a method, but we have access to this method in particular, which is our x and y, or we're passing, it's our add method. And remember, we have to pass two integers here. So, and it automatically came up with the name x and y, which is okay. Let's go ahead and define those. Let's say integer x equals well, just a minute, and we'll come up with some value about 6, and y equals 4. Okay, so let's see if this works okay. So we're going to do output, calling add and what it will equal to, and then we'll display the student1. And remember, the student class doesn't have any methods in it at all. So let's go back to this, and we're calling the add method, and the only place we have the add method is over here in the person class. But you notice that we didn't even access, we didn't say anything about the person class except for here in student, where we said extend person or inherit from person. So go back to this and see if this works okay. So I'm going to run the file, and when I do, it comes out to call add, and that's what we said here. We called add, and that equals, whoa, should have put a space in here, and then it called that method. We sent the values 4 and 6, and when we ran that, it came out to be 10. Call add equals 10. So there we have it. We have uh, two classes here. This is the superclass, and this is the subclass, and when we call that, when we create an object out of the student class, if it's extending person, it has access to all those methods. So we uh, created an object which we called S1 student type. We had access to the add method, which we only put in the person, but since it was extended by a student, it had access to it. So there's a little bit of inheritance. Okay, that's all.